So let's dive into the birthing through hypnosis philosophy. The first thing we need to talk about is natural birth. Natural birth is birth as Mother Nature intended it. And when I first taught my Birthing Through Hypnosis course, I had a student who asked me why I was so anti-intervention. And it made me realize that I had done a poor job of explaining my stance on intervention, because I am certainly not anti-intervention. Interventions save lives, they save mama's lives, babies' lives. I am anti-unnecessary intervention, because in our culture, 30% of mamas are ending up having a surgery, having a cesarean section for their baby to be born. And what we know about childbirth does not line up with that. Childbirth does, in the best of circumstances, there are things that go sideways and then require surgery to give birth. But what we're seeing in our culture that leads to a 30% rate is what's called the domino effect, where when a woman has an intervention, it often leads to another intervention and leads to another intervention. And when the interventions end up piling on top of each other, they're more likely to lead to a cesarean. And we'll talk about some of the details of that as we go. But this is part of medicalized birth, right? Which is the norm in our culture. Medicalized birth, plus our medical system has a fear of litigation. So that combination leads to those statistics. So most of the mamas that I work with are wanting to stay as far away from those statistics as possible and avoid unnecessary intervention and let our bodies do what they're meant to do, right? Just like we're not having to think while we're pregnant about our body making the baby's brain, making the baby's heart, making the baby's 10 fingers and 10 toes. It's just happening naturally. Well, our body also knows how to birth naturally. And it's built into the magic of this body that we're given as women, is how to grow a baby and how to birth that baby. So, but one of the things that's happened in our culture is that birth has become so private and so separate that most of us never see another woman giving birth before it's our turn. One of my favorite books is The Red Tent by Anita Diamant, and she talks in detail about how women, when they used to be on their moon or they used to menstruate, they would separate themselves from the men and be in what they called the red tent, and they would support each other in childbirth. It was women supporting women. And because the women were also the caregivers of the children would be there. And so from the time you were really small, you were seeing women giving birth. You knew what it looked like. You knew what it sounded like. You knew the support that would be there. You knew basically what it would look like when it was your turn. And we don't have that in our bodies. Most of us never see a birth until it's our turn. So this is why it's important to take classes, why it's important to read, why it's important to talk to people who've been through natural birth. And that doesn't mean hearing everybody's negative story. It's hearing what worked for you, what helped you, right? What wisdom do you wish you had had that you didn't have? So that's what I mean by natural birth, is birth as Mother Nature intended, where we are hands off and it takes as long as it takes. And we use the techniques that are natural that allow us to work with that process and not against it. So one of those techniques is hypnosis. And so let's talk for a moment about what is hypnosis. And it's funny because I face this question a lot, and I really, really, really do not like the word hypnosis, because it conjures up all kinds of connotations of the woman being unconscious, of her, squawking like a chicken, of, someone having power over her by snapping her finger, her baby's going to be born. By snapping her finger, she's going to, feel absolutely nothing. And so it's been talked about in our culture, kind of like a circus trick or like a shortcut. And that is not how I think about it. Whether I'm teaching childbirth or whether I am working with someone who's in chronic pain as a marriage and family therapist, working with someone who's experiencing anxiety or depression. There are all kinds of ways that hypnosis can be helpful, but it's definitely not a shortcut to having to work with your own mind. So the way I think about hypnosis, it's a state of relaxation. And it's a state of relaxation where we create the relaxation through being internally focused. So what that means is that it doesn't matter what's going on the outside. We are putting our attention to something that feels like it's helping us stay in a state of openness and relaxation. And when our bodies are relaxed, they are more supple. And so we're really using hypnosis to give our brain something to do so that we do not focus on fear, because fear leads to tension. So let's talk about that for a moment. The fear, tension, pain continuum, because that is a real thing. So the fear tension piece is biologically built into us. It's here on purpose, because when we are in actual danger, our body needs to be able to, squirt the adrenaline hormones, squirt the fear hormones, stress hormones, and be able to get us prepared for anything. So when we have that response, our body is ready to fight, it's ready to flee, and it's ready to freeze, right? Those are the things that happen potentially in our body when we are facing actual danger. So when the tiger is, approaching, either all of our energy goes to our arms and our legs so that we can fight, and we experience incredible tension in our body for that. We flee, right? All of a sudden, we are able to run at, incredible speed that we've never been able to do before, or we are completely still, like barely breathing, tense, right? Like a stone sculpture. So that's really important when there's actual danger. But what happens for most of us is we have what's called anticipatory fear, right? Where we're thinking about something that's not happening right now, maybe will never happen, could happen, and we're tensing up as a result. And so even the thought of childbirth at 8 years old, right? When I go back to that story, watching the birth on TV and just crying in my room that I was never going to have children because I was so scared of giving birth. I was not a pregnant 8-year-old. That's not what I was facing, right? 25 years later, I was having to work through that anticipatory fear that I'd been carrying for all those years. So really taking this time of pregnancy to be able to look at our fears and release them is important. And the reason it's so important is because fear creates tension, as we just described. And when your body is tense, you increase the discomfort that you experience in childbirth, right? Imagine your body is floppy and open. It's going to be way easier for your baby to get out than when you are so tense that it's having to fight against your tense muscles to open, right? Your body's having to fight. So we are therefore working on releasing fear, because we want to be able to release tension. We don't want to get into that fear, tension, pain cycle. And part of releasing fear is through education, right? Being able to take the mystery out of giving birth. And that's part of why we're talking about what is childbirth and what happens in your body and all of these things. So hopefully you are going to have a lot more information at the end of this than when I think about my poor mom, who had never taken a childbirth class, was taught nothing, and was by herself while she was laboring with no understanding of what was happening in her body that would make it feel the way that it did. It was just terrifying to her. When you know what's happening, you understand why it feels the way it feels. Wow, what a difference. What a blessing to be able to have that understanding. So education is one piece. We're also going to talk about evaluating your fears, right? Listening to them. And we'll get into that later, but that's one thing that we can do is really pay attention to what they are so we can take action where needed and then know what to let go of, right? So, and then the third is learning very concrete techniques that you're going to practice, that you're going to be able to feel in your body, and you're going to be able to know which of those techniques actually work for you and which of those techniques you can just let go of, right? I'm going to teach you more than you need. And therefore, when you are in labor, you're going to be able to gather the things and have your partner help you gather the things that are most helpful to you and practice them. And when one of them, stops working, you'll go to the next one and you'll go to the next one. And then by the time you turn back to the first one, it'll work again. So this is the journey of releasing fear so that you can be in as little discomfort as humanly possible.